AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Thanks for joining me this morning. Great show today. We got Sheriff David Clarke, who apparently the left will tell you is now in cahoots with Russia. That's real. Or he's compromised, which I laugh at even harder. He's going to join me today, and Mark Walters from Armed American Radio and A.W.R. Hawkins as well. They're going to join me. We're going to talk about some Second Amendment stuff going on. We'll have Comrade Clarke on first, though. I laugh even saying it, how stupid it sounds. I have to wonder if some of these people making these accusations, is it physically painful to be that stupid? It has to be. Anyway, yesterday, the world ended version, 27 or 28 from liberals? The world was ending because President Trump called into question the integrity and the truthfulness of a group comprised of James Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Rosenstein, Obama, Clinton, Strzok, and Page, people we all know have lied to our government and to us. And he had the audacity to question their integrity and their infallibility. My God. The nerve of that man. Anyway, we're going to get some sound out of the meeting. It was a really impressive day. And let me be very clear about something. I will be the first one to tell you that I think there's about 55 things he could have said differently yesterday, but I don't expect him to come out verbally perfect. He's just not going to do it. He's going to say things, and he's going to come back and say, guys, come on, you know what I meant. Which everybody apparently now, if you listen to Chuck Schumer, my God, is his voice grating, and Pelosi. Apparently President Putin has something on President Trump, and he's still waiting to use it, I guess. I don't know. And then President Putin said that he actually wanted Trump to win because Trump had spoken about resetting relations with Russia. The same group that thought that Hillary Clinton giving him a reset button, which was ha-ha, funny, even though it was stupid as hell, are now freaking out because he wants to. And this is North Korea all over again, right? We're going nuclear war. We're there. We're headed there. Sean Hannity, listen to he and President Trump discussing a very important topic that is not getting the noise it should, which is Israel. Listen up.
Very long meeting, and it was a good meeting. We discussed so many different things, including nuclear, including war and peace, including economic, Syria, Ukraine. We discussed many, many things. And at the end of a long period of time, I mean, it was really it was just the two of us and interpreters. And at the end of this meeting, I think we really came to a lot of good conclusions. A really good conclusion for Israel, something very strong. He's a believer in Israel. He's a fan of Bibi, and really helping him a lot, and will help him a lot, which is good for all of us.
Manchurian Candidate. I mean, seriously, I just, the left is and you're going to hear it in the sound bites coming up. They take this to a whole new level. Listen to, I've got to come up with a name for Schumer other than Chuck Schumer. He's an effing clown, guys. I mean, he is. The fact that he's a multi-tenured official, that people would vote for him more than one time, speaks to the level of insanity on the left. Anyway, listen to Chuck Schumer talk about the fact that President Trump is now basically working for Russia.
Rather than taking the opportunity to confront Putin, Rather than taking the opportunity to demand that Putin hand over the named Russian intelligence agents indicted last week, the president sided with Vladimir Putin's denial over the unanimous conclusion of the United States intelligence community. He took the word of the KGB over the men and women of the CIA. Rather than placing blame for what happened in 2016 on Russia where it belongs, the president had the gall to blame both countries for the troubled relationship. The president put what's best for him over what's best for the security and well-being of the United States.
And again, this is much like North Korea. So he was supposed to sit down and say, hey, Vlad, listen up, dude. You're an asshole. We don't like you. I want these 12 people deported. And I want you to admit to the world that you tried to rig our election. That would have got the things off to a swell start. No, it was a summit. It was a meeting in which both parties are trying to get back to neutral, to not to reset, but just to kind of stabilize. Listen, I don't, for a second, I wouldn't trust Vladimir Putin. But at some point you have to have a discussion in negotiations to find, and I'm using air quotes, common ground. Because the meetings, nothing happens ahead of that. Nothing happens after that. You do notice that the people, they have to do this. If you listen to them, they don't ever talk about people. They talk about agencies, right? Because the second they were to mention a name, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Rosenstein, Strzok, Page, people immediately associate any of that stuff with bullshit and lying. But the intelligence agency, and that's not the boots on the ground people. I want to believe with my heart of hearts, and I do, that the true around-the-clock, hardcore FBI, American-loving agents are trying to do the right thing, but the people that are giving them orders aren't. They aren't. They are corrupt. Our president trusts the president of Russia more than a group of people who tried to get him beaten in a presidential election by creating, well, basically they tried to circumvent the process. They tried to rig a presidential election in a democratic country, in a republic. It's just too stupid to elaborate on. And by the way, Chris Wallace is a clown. He belongs on CNN, although Fox News is turning left, so he can stay there. But he doesn't fit on the same station as Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity. He got to sit down with Putin, and I think he's a weasel. And listen to him trying to make Putin. I felt like half the interview was him trying to tell Putin that we hate Trump and Trump's an asshole every bit as much as anybody else hates him. But listen up to him. Two different sound bites. First one is about the relationship.
I thought the news conference today, my opinion, was a bit curious because President Trump spent more time criticizing the Democrats and asking about the Democratic server than he did in criticizing Russia and asking about the GRU. There are many theories in the United States about why President Trump is so reluctant to criticize you, and I'd like to ask you about a couple of them. One is that you have something on him, compromat. The other is that as a skilled politician and a former KGB officer, you know how to play him. You use phrases like fake news and deep state. And my question is, do you find President Trump easy to deal with?
Значит, что касается, первое, что касается... Well, the first point I'm about to make is, why did we talk about like the polite people? Why should this come as a surprise? Was it worth going all the way to Helsinki, going through the Atlantic to just insult one another? And well, it's not exactly the diplomatic standard in the world. There's no need to go and meet personally if you just wanted to insult another person. We met to try to find a way for improving our relationship and not aggravating it or destroying it completely. And the second part of the answer is whether we have something on them. We don't have anything on them, and there can't be anything on them. I don't want to insult President Trump when I say this, and I may come as rude. But before he announced that he will run for presidency, he was of no interest for us. He was a rich person, but, well, there's plenty of rich persons in the United States. He was in the construction business. He organized the beauty pageants. But no, it would never occur to anyone that he would think of running for president. He never mentioned his political ambitions. It sounds like it's another nonsense. I just mentioned this in the press conference. St. Petersburg Economic Forum was visited by 500 businessmen. Well, pretty much every one of them is a major industrialist, a tycoon of greater scale than President Trump. Do you think that our special services actually organize surveillance on each and every of them? Well, unlike you, unlike the United States, we don't do this. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough manpower to organize the total state of control. That's not part of our plans. And it's clear that we did nothing of that kind against Mr. Trump.
Oh, my God. When you have to listen to the president of Russia and realize that he has more credibility than James Comey or Brennan or Clapper, then it's a troubling day. But, I mean, he said it. I mean, and I believe that they weren't on the radar. He wasn't on the radar before he announced it. Why would he be? Why would he be any different than any of these other people? There are far more wealthy people that the UK has been involved, or that Russia has been involved in. Anyway, as hard as Chris tried to get this to work, it didn't work. But listen to, and you heard him talking about it, that why would we go to Finland? And by the way, Helsinki, Finland's not that far from where Putin is, so I don't want him to act like he trekked across the globe. But he tried. He tried as hard as he could to get this to make America hate Trump even more than he believes they should. But listen to him talking. This is Vladimir Putin talking about terrorism, which I agree in many ways what he said. Listen up.
President Trump said in his news conference that our relationship has never been worse, but that changed a few hours ago. How has the relationship, big picture, between the U.S. and Russia changed today?
Primarily, I think we should be grateful to our staff and our aides who spent several last months working with one another, and not just in the preparations of this summit. I'm referring to the effort of our agencies across the board, who worked in even the very sensitive areas, sensitive both for Russia and the United States. Primarily, I refer to the counterterrorism efforts. Today, talking with President Trump, we agreed that terrorism is a greater threat than it seems at first. Because, God forbid, if something happens, if there is a terrorist attack using the weapons of mass destruction, if they get their hands to weapons of mass destruction, it may have devastating ramifications. And so our military, our special agencies do establish cooperation in this particularly important area.
Yeah, sounds rational, huh? I mean, that's what people that are, and again, I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, but the fact of the matter is, that's how this is supposed to work. The two, again, I do find it humorous, I guess, that the world now sees Russia, who, remember the soundbites yesterday about President Obama calling them the weakest and littlest and smallest and ineffectual. Now they're the most powerful, potentially dangerous people in the world. And the left basically took the post-meeting press conference and turned it into Trump basically becoming a card-carrying citizen of the KGB. Chris Cuomo, I mean, CNN, I got to tell you, I'm at a point now where I'm not stunned that CNN's ratings continue to plummet. I'm truly stunned that anyone in this country turns it on, other than foreign agents knowing how they're messing with this nation. But listen to Chris Cuomo from CNN talk about President Trump's betrayal and treason.
It is July 16th, 2018. Many are saying this is a day that will live in infamy. And that's true. They say it will be remembered as the day the presidency, as a symbol of America's protection, died. But I see something else as the result here. I think we hit bottom. And if so, there's a blessing in that, because there can be no more debate about which way is up. Donald John Trump delivered us here with a display of cowardly self-interest. His decision to choose to believe Vladimir Putin over his own government on the matter of Russian attacks on our election. As simple and as shocking as it was embarrassing to hear those words. But when it happened, everything changed. It was like the free world gasped. Now, we all knew that Trump wouldn't and maybe couldn't confront Putin about his attack on our democracy to anyone's true satisfaction, if only because Trump had disparaged the truth of the matter too many times before. And we thought we knew why, because Trump conflates the attack with his legitimacy as president. But in all that, we never suspected that a president would betray his own country as an exercise in vanity. But then Donald Trump betrayed America. And after that gasp at Trump's perfidy came all the exhaled words of outrage and calls for justice. John Brennan, the former CIA director under President Obama, called it, quote, nothing short of treasonous. Now, that's a loaded word. The law does mention giving enemies aid and comfort as treasonous. And no question, Russia is an enemy for attacking our democracy. And what Trump did today does resemble aiding and comforting. And the law has very harsh penalties, including disqualifying the treasonous from holding office. But what's the reality? There will likely be no negative consequence like that for President Trump. No prosecution, no impeachment. And I'm not making a case here that there should be. My case is for something else that we're seeing in response that has been elusive, as elusive as justice in America recently, and that is consensus.
So we're going to go to break, and Sheriff Clarke's going to join me in a second. But to be clear, that is where the left is standing. And let me just throw a couple things out there. On multiple occasions before yesterday, President Trump has conceded that Russia interfered in the election. There are sound bites everywhere. You don't need to search very hard for them. They're out there. He's talked about it. He knows that there is an attempt. He also knows that not one single vote was changed by anybody or anything. And let me just add this. No one needed Russia or anyone else to convince me not to vote for Hillary Clinton. Nobody. The fact that as many people voted for her is scary in and of itself, considering what she's done. But we didn't need Russia to tell us what a horrible scum of the earth human being she was. We didn't, and there was no other option in this election. When you look at what was going on in the Supreme Court, the fact of the matter was that had to happen. Trump had to win. Can you imagine? Think about this. If she had won, nothing that's happened in the last year and a half would have happened. Our economy wouldn't be better. It would be worse. We would not be at the peace table with North Korea or Russia. We would not have found out about the FBI, because the FBI and the CIA and the DOJ, all that stuff was wrapped around the Clinton campaign, the Fusion GPS document, and the DNC trying to rig the presidential election, which we now know happened. They failed, thank God. That tells you how bad of a candidate is. They basically rigged the entire thing, and they got everybody to vote on the class president and believe it was her, and at the end of the day, she still lost. So we're taking a break. We'll be back with Sheriff Clarke in just a minute.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think he's gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is a man I'm always privileged and honored to speak with, a man I proudly call a friend. He is Sheriff David Clarke. Good morning, Sheriff. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. How are you doing? Hello to your listeners.
Well, I'm wondering if I will be on the DOJ's radar after this, because apparently I'm now speaking to, based on one photo, a card-carrying member of the Politburo, the KGB, second in command of Putin, because you had a picture taken with a woman. If I understand this correctly, everything I understand is there was a woman who was indicted yesterday in D.C. as a Russian agent who was trying to infiltrate the NRA and certain other organizations to the benefit of Russia. And apparently, somehow, you taking a photo or you being snapped in a photo with her means that you are now a full-blown commie. And I'm wondering if you have any comment about that. I can't even say it with a straight face.
Other than to laugh, no. I don't. The whole thing, this whole thing has taken, and I heard some of what you were talking about before you had me on, and, just the more bizarre this thing gets. As Trey Gowdy said a couple of weeks ago when he told Rod Rosenstein, finish the hell up with this damn investigation. The country's coming apart. The left now will seize on this, and they'll think the meeting with Vladimir Putin yesterday. They're talking and such crazy talk. The treasonous and high crimes. What Brennan said I thought was very just despicable. But that's a guy who's lied before Congress. Before he lied in 2014 to Dianne Feinstein when she asked if
John Brennan was a member of the Communist Party during the Cold War. I mean,
right.
I mean that's a little known fact, probably relevant to the conversation, but I haven't heard that mentioned yet.
Right. So that's what I mean when I say that this thing has taken just it continues to take these bizarre twists and turns, and they'll seize on anything they can get and try to make a big deal out of it, and it is all done to discredit and delegitimize President Trump's administration, and I think that's the great damage that's being done to America by the left, by the Democrats.
Honestly, I'm pissed, and I get more pissed about because it's bizarre is such a kind word for what they are right now. I can't even come up with the word that does it justice. But I watched a couple weeks ago as Nancy Pelosi and many Democratic people tried to ruin Jim Jordan's life with a lie and a slander about him being a wrestling coach. And I realized that it's kind of naive of me not to have realized this sooner. If they want to ruin you, they'll do everything they can to ruin you. And this thing that came out yesterday, this picture of you, to me, in a nutshell, sums up who they are. If they don't like you, and this is where, our president stood in front of the media and said, you know what? I don't trust a group comprised of Jim Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Rosenstein, Obama, Clinton, Strzok, and Page, because they've all lied to the government and lied to the American people. So why should I be? And they all lied in an effort to not to have Hillary Clinton elected, to rig an election. Why would he point to them? And I got to tell you, I don't know how you work day to day with a security team of comprised of people like that who and are knowingly trying to get you out. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to do, and I think the president has made it clear. And I trust his sixth sense about this stuff. He knows he can't trust many people in his government, not in his administration, but in his government, and for good reason. They've demonstrated these things, like you indicated. And I just, I remind people, you have to have the stones for this per se. When it comes to people that they're out for. I mean, look what they did to General Flynn, for heaven's sakes. All right, completely destroyed his life. So you're right. When they want to, they will try. But I'll tell you what, I sleep well at night. My house is in order. They can do what they want, talk to me, subpoena me, question me. It doesn't matter, okay? What matters is the truth at the end. And the truth, I still believe, will come out. I still think the truth will come out as it relates to General Flynn, where there's some technical things where he didn't register and all that. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think what they're doing to Manafort, okay, what Manafort, and I'm not defending Manafort, but what he was engaged in, and if he was years before the Clinton campaign, had nothing to do with the Clinton campaign, and now this guy's been ordered into jail with no bond, as if he's some security risk.
Right.
This is all just Mueller and these goons from the federal government putting the thumb screws to people as a sign to others that this will happen to you. Well, guess what? Curt, I've had to fight my entire life to make it as far as I have. I'm a fighter, and I will keep fighting. But and one of the things I'm going to continue to fight for is this president.
Right. and just know that there are millions of us out here who have your back. I'm blown away by where we are right now, and I want to switch topics because I want to get to the border and what's going on down there, because I can think of nobody after talking to people down at the border. I want to know if President Trump were to hand you a check tomorrow and say, here's the check, you fill in the number. But I want inside of the next 24 months, I want a secure southern border. What does that look like physically and psychologically? What does a secure border, and recognizing that you're never going to stop 100%, right? I mean, you and I both know that. They're going to get across, but you're going to be able, if you can find a way to, because, and I asked this for this reason, Sheriff. I was in Afghanistan, and I saw some of the technology being deployed in the field by our soldiers, and it's mind-boggling what they can do. And so I'm talking about aerial observation, satellite, and stuff like that. But if you were to have a blank check, what would the border look like 2 years from now from a physical perspective and from a manpower perspective?
Sure. Well, first of all, the wall I think is important. I think it's necessary, that physical barrier. They have one over in Israel. I was over there. I saw it. It does work. It does keep the terrorists out. It keeps Hamas and some of those other terrorist organizations out of Israel. So I think the physical aspect of it is huge. But then I would end this catch and release thing. I don't understand why when people come over and cross the border, we take them in, we take some information, and then we either detain them for deportation hearing or return them loose. That stuff's got to end. I think that, when you start looking at people who overstayed their visas, so I'd clean all that crap out and get rid of that. And then, the deportation system or the process takes too long. All right. Now, I know somebody had asked for 5,000 more judges for these deportation hearings, and the president said no, and the president was right in saying no. These judges, they don't work hard enough. The process is too long. They allow these lawyers, these deportation lawyers, to come in and stretch this thing out. And so those are the things that I would take care of in the country with that check. And then there's this thing called Congress, okay, and that you can't do anything with a check for. Congress has to update and fix this from a law standpoint.
Right.
Okay. What are we going to do with the 15 million that are here? Well, they got to go back. Well, it's not going to be feasible to just start hunting them down one at a time.
Right.
But as they're caught, they can't get local law enforcement to assist. They stop these individuals. You find out that they're illegally in the country, and then some of these law enforcement agencies, these jails are turning these people back out. This thing is a huge mess. But with that check, I would start there and then work from there.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'll bet you the number's closer to 25 million than 15 when you talk about the number.
Yeah, we don't know.
Documented. No, we don't. But then you see, I'm with you. I think we should do this. But then you see this Ocasio-Cortez woman in New York get elected, and I don't know if there's anything that she stands for that's even remotely American. And you've seen in California, they've appointed politicians and people to political positions who aren't legal citizens. We've got a country that is it's divided. And I keep trying to tell people, in the real world, there isn't always a middle ground, and there aren't always two sides to a story. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to start with those 15 million people, that's an enormous manpower drain. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would cost from a police perspective. But the organization that would actually probably do most of the heavy lifting there, the Democrats want to eliminate. They want to actually abolish an organization of law enforcement officers, because in their minds that would lead to a potentially better end game. And I don't understand how you can logically even say that out loud.
The Democrat Party has gone off the rails. They've been under siege for a while by this radical left, but now this radical left is literally going out and purging some of the old Democrats. Like Dianne Feinstein at the Democrat
right.
Party failed to endorse her and endorse her progressive candidate. Some of them are moderates, and really Dianne Feinstein is not moderate, but that's how that's how the party views it right now. So they're under siege. But I think this thing needs to be paid attention to, because, I've heard people laugh and the kooky left and the kooky fringe element of the Democrat Party. These people are building the nest. Okay, and they're going to get more and more of these far left progressives elected into these positions. At some point, they may end up with power somewhere. Okay, a
That's
governor,
terrifying.
for instance. If you think about that and what they would do if they got their hands on the levers of power, it's really scary. So I think it's something worth paying attention to.
Well, I think if you look over in London at Mayor Khan, I think you can start to see what happens when someone who has no interest in your value, your cultures, your history, when someone like that gets into a position of power, the people that pay are the law-abiding citizens. And, thank God, appropriately say this, thank God for the Second Amendment. Because you're starting to see, I saw yesterday or 2 days ago, police officers in a town showed up at a veteran's home because the veteran's son had been called out as a potential risk, and they wanted to take his firearms. And the veteran said, "You're not taking my guns." And the officers were very uncomfortable even asking about it. And it ended up being he put his guns into, storage. But the fact of the matter is that event would even potentially be possible here tells you how far we've come in the last, not just 2 years, but the last decade and a half. And I don't see it softening up because yesterday you saw that the world is going to end every day. It just is going to end a different way to liberals every day. It's acid rain. It's North Korea. Today it's Russia. It was and they're allowed to keep the attention of people who aren't as grounded as you or I think. They're allowed to keep the people's attention on a shiny ball that actually doesn't even matter. And that to me is the dangerous piece. Because like you said, General Flynn, who spent his whole life in service of this nation, has had his life destroyed for no other reason than the guy he worked for they hated. And those casualties are not going to get any less. Let me ask you one last question, and I wanted to ask you this earlier. First off, did you watch Peter Strzok's testimony?
Yes, I did.
You got to tell me what your impression was when that was over.
I've never seen a more arrogant jerk in my entire life. You sat up there and looked at the smirk he had on his face. It kind of communicated, okay, go ahead, Congress, take your best shot. You got nothing on me. There's nothing that you'll ever be able to do to me. That was his attitude throughout the entire hearing. I thought it was very disrespectful, but also I thought it was a slap in the face of the American people. These people were engaged in criminal behavior to overturn an election, and they almost got away with it. And he knows it, and he was right up in there, and he doesn't give a damn about it. But for him to display that, I didn't think any bombshell thing would happen out of this, his testimony, but I thought he'd come there contrite. I really did. I thought he'd come there and humble himself and say, hey, look, decisions were made, some mistakes were made, some whatever, and I'm sorry about what. I thought he'd be contrite. He wasn't. And that's what shocked me. Just the arrogance.
Yeah. The runner-up in shocking me from that was the Democrats' insistence on defending a person like that. And I thought they were shameful and embarrassing in and of themselves. Sheriff, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find you, and what are you up to right now?
DACenterprises.org. That's my website, and everything about me, what I'm doing, saying, writing about appears at the website, one-stop shopping, including social media.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheriff. You take care of yourself. God bless.
Be well, Curt.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is Armed American Radio's Mark Walters. First thing I'm going to ask you, Mark, there's a story out yesterday that the local sheriff showed up at a Vietnam veteran's house. Apparently his son had been turned in by somebody locally as a potential danger or a threat. And these police officers showed up at this gentleman's house and told him they were going to confiscate his firearms. Right. He said, well, no, you're not, and here's how this is going to work. He said that he felt that they were kind of embarrassed and uncomfortable even being there, but they came to some sort of agreement that he would put his firearms in lockdown or whatever it was.
Right.
And I just spoke with Sheriff Clarke about this. The fact that we're having this conversation in this country at this time should tell you all you want to know about the left and their desire to take our guns. That's exactly what the goal is. But this story, I want you to talk to me about your thoughts when you heard this story.
Well, due process is history, number one. And this is what the Democrats want to do in order to take the Second Amendment. Let me explain exactly what I mean with I want people to understand exactly where I'm going with this, okay? I want to make this very, very clear. The left cannot get rid of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment exists on that old parchment paper that they can't stand, and you know it, I know it, and listener, you know it. Because they can't rid America of the Second Amendment, the only thing they can do is legislate around it. And by legislating around it, they can't. When they can't legislate, when they can't pass anything through the halls of Congress, what are they left to do? They're left to use the courts, right? That's why they want to stack with activist judges. This is why they're fighting Kavanaugh, et cetera. Right. And when they are not going to be successful with that, what are they going to do? They're going to start using Bloomberg's money with organizations like Everytown for Gun Safety, Moms Demand Action, et cetera, their friends in the mainstream media, to start pushing, quote-unquote, common sense gun control in enclaves that are friendly to them. And they're successful in doing it, which is why we were disappointed with Governor Scott down in Florida as a prime example for signing these quote-unquote red flags, these 18 to 21, because what that does is that eliminates our democratic process and our due process and gives local politicians and activists the ability to con the American people into giving up their rights and eliminating due process. And we just saw an example of how that came full circle with the story that you're talking about. Were the cops uncomfortable being there? They probably were. But the cop was doing the job that unfortunately he's been told he has to do by his boss.
Right.
And due process is gone.
Leonard Cottrell is the gentleman's name. He served 3 tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He is a disabled vet. And this happened in New Jersey. And apparently his 13-year-old son had made a comment in school about the middle school security.
Right.
And they were operating under the auspices of a new firearm confiscatory law signed by Governor Phil Murphy. The law, listen to this. It's exactly what you just said. The law allows an individual's guns to be seized if the person is, quote, deemed a threat to themselves and others in the state. After finding no firearms in the son's room, they attempted to take his shotgun and his pistol. He quickly determined they had no warrant, told them they would not be taking his firearms.
Right.
He agreed to store his guns outside his home while his son's comments are investigated, which is ridiculous in and of itself. He said that the troopers, quote-unquote, danced around the issue when he confronted them with the procedure necessary to confiscate guns under the law. He said, no one from the state was going to take my firearms without due process.
Now you're down to a local municipality enforcing a state-level edict, okay, that skirts that has no national ramification. You see, this is that equation that I just gave you. This is what the left is doing with the money. This is why groups for Everytown for Gun Safety need to be confronted. This is why Moms Demand Action needs to be confronted, Gabby Giffords, because what they're doing is they're pushing for these laws that violate our constitutional rights without going through any legislative process whatsoever. And it's very frightening. And you just described for us by reading what was happening with that story in, of all places, New Jersey. That's one of the enclaves that I was referring to, because you see that wouldn't happen here in the state of Georgia.
Right.
Okay.
No, it wouldn't.
They can only do these things in friendly territory. In unfriendly territory, it's not going to happen. Now let's go to the elephant in the room when it comes to should he have given up his guns or locked them away or moved them. You know, he probably made the smart move to avoid confrontation or escalating something that could have turned very, very ugly at that moment in time. Sadly, you know, am I going to sit here and say that he should have fought him? No, I'm not going to say that. What I'm saying is that he probably made the right decision at the time to avoid any further escalation that could have resulted in somebody being injured, himself or law enforcement. It was probably a smart move to do at the time, sadly.
Let's just take that. I mean, just think about this. So he's going to have to go through the process of getting his firearms back. What happens if in his home there's a break-in and someone in his home is murdered while he is unable to protect his family? I mean, and
nothing,
I'm obviously
absolutely
talking about
nothing. The state will take no responsibility for anything.
Right.
Nothing.
No.
This is a state that was willing to put a young woman in jail for 3 years for simply having a firearm in her car, which, by the way, is not in violation of any federal transportation of firearms laws. Now, she was in violation of New Jersey law. She should have known the law in New Jersey before she went in. But nonetheless, what happened is this case highlights the difference between man-made and natural law. I talk about that all the time. The reason we get so angry when they put somebody in prison for doing what we think is nothing wrong simply for having a firearm is because she has a natural right to do that and defend her life. And here we've got man-made laws that build walls in front of us, and we know these laws are wrong, and they're indefensible. They're so indefensible that New Jersey couldn't defend themselves for their own law and let her go. But it requires a public outcry from us to do that, and it required mustering of tremendous resources when something terrible like this happens. But we see it in airports in New Jersey and New York. We see it in New Jersey's notorious for this. Right. Brian Aitken, for gosh sakes, was sentenced to 7 years in a state penitentiary for simply moving his firearms lawfully from one place to another after calling the state police and asking them how to do it.
Right.
So, these laws are wrong, and just because a man made them doesn't mean that they follow the natural law right of self-defense. They do not. These are infringements at their very core.
The problem I see is twofold now, and they're going to intersect, and that scares me in the sense that you have a government that is no longer trusted by the American people. That there is just the trust that we have had or that existed no longer exists. When you have that distrust, and then you have a government looking to overreach and involve itself in our everyday lives, such as confiscating our firearms, those two things are going to come crashing together at some point.
Interestingly, Curt, let me interject something here with you. You probably want to go here anyway, but Representative Cohen yesterday tweeted out, "Where is our military?"
Yes.
And in what is, to me, not a veiled threat, but a threat or threatening military action against a sitting president, which to me means a violent overthrow.
A coup. That was a
you're talking a coup. This
asking,
is, banana republic,
exactly
third world
right.
garbage. But this is a Democrat, Cohen, calling for this on a Twitter account. The Democrats are so unhinged. That's why we talked about it last week. The balloon's going to pop at some point in time. What's going to happen when Kavanaugh is confirmed? And he will be confirmed.
Yeah,
and then what happens in 2018 when they don't take back the House and the Republicans gain seats in the Senate? And what's going to happen in 2020 when Trump is reelected? The next 2 years are very scary when we see talk like this from Democrat politicians. The only thing I can ask now is what other politicians are going to jump on board with that?
Right. Well,
like they did with ICE and the socialist, who is now making a fool of herself with not being an expert on anything on national television.
I mean, come on. Did you hear that? I mean, that was we're talking about the soundbite out of Ocasio-Cortez. Who she called Israel an occupier, which first of all, come on, you're not that stupid. But secondly, almost immediately backed it up when called out as admitting, I don't know anything about the Middle East.
And she was questioned on that by the host, and then she was kind of forced into a corner and said, look, I'm not the expert, which essentially meant stop asking me these questions. I can't answer these questions.
It was the Johnson Aleppo moment. I mean, it was and this is a woman who was elected in a district that had a 13% turnout, by the way. And the left is holding her up as some sort of, which I love, because nothing could speak and scream anti-American more than an admitted socialist, which is exactly what she is. I want to finish up. I want to ask you one last thing. Since you and I last talked, Peter Strzok sat in front of a couple committees. Did you watch the hearing at all?
I did, yeah. As much of it as I could.
What was your takeaway? What was your takeaway?
I believe that Strzok is a liar, a deep state liar, who got away with what he got away with because the system allowed him to get away with it, and the system which was put in place under Comey and never dismantled allowed him to do what he did. And the mere fact that he, as Sheriff Clarke was saying previously, was not held accountable and showed up in an arrogant fashion tells me more that he believes even to this day that the state runs so deep that there's not going to be any ramification to what he did, and that he can go out there and make the statements that he currently made with absolutely no sign of of contrition at all, and that should scare people.
I saw a guy testify with the knowledge that nothing was going to happen no matter what he said. And that is a scary place, because this is a guy who should be held to not a standard, but a much higher standard than you and I are held to. And for him to say that the tweets that he tweeted had no impact or effect on his job is ludicrous and laughable.
If this guy, Curt, because you're right, if this guy had come out and intended, if he actually felt any type of remorse for what he said or what he did and we're talking 50,000 text messages, okay?
Right.
I don't know what your thumbs look like after 50,000 text messages, but
listen, I love my wife.
We're not even talking his personal phone.
No, but I mean, I love my wife, but I've not texted her 50,000 times.
Oh, gosh, no. If somebody was texting me 50,000 times, I'd throw my phone in the creek behind AAR Ranch.
That's a stalker thing.
The fact is that Strzok said if he wanted to make the appearance or bring the appearance, he could have easily done it by standing up in his opening statements. He could have said, look, I said some things that, while I feel may have been misconstrued, I can easily understand how they were by the American public. What I did was reprehensible. I had an affair. I did this. He could have come out with some, contrite and made these statements and given himself some level of believability at least.
Yep.
And he didn't. He didn't even try. So
I had to laugh
why he didn't try.
At the Gomert's questioning about him using that smile with his wife, how the Democrats got so offended that he would pull out that, the Democrats who protected Bill Clinton. Hey, I'm going to end the interview with this. I'm going to hang on. Do you want to talk about the Cohen movie?
Oh, yeah, the Showtime. If you've got time, or we can talk about it next week, whatever you want.
No, you know what? I'll wait for next week because I think it's a full price. But I want to end with this quote. The LA Times, in the Heller versus DC suit, Judge Kavanaugh, in his writing, and I found this yesterday, and I think this is one of the greatest things I've ever read. Quote, a ban on a class of arms is not an incidental regulation. It is equivalent to a ban on a category of speech.
And what I would want our listeners right now to know, the definitive position of Kavanaugh on the Second Amendment that has the left insane comes from the Heller 2 decision. I would ask that you go and just Google up Heller 2 decision, Kavanaugh dissent. The dissent was so strong and so powerfully worded that the writers of the majority opinion actually countered the dissent in their majority opinion because it was so well done. And read that's his definitive position. That's what's got the left nuts. The Heller 2 decision, read Kavanaugh's dissent. You'll understand exactly where he stands on protecting your rights.
And one last quote. Decree that law-abiding Americans have a right to carry a gun in public. Now you can see why the left is going to, and he's going to get confirmed. He's going to
get confirmed, and what we know is that we're finally going to get one of those cases that addresses carrying a gun in public. Heller dealt with inside the home. We know that Kavanaugh's going to probably be that tip that brings some of these cases to cert at the Supreme Court. We're finally going to get a quote-unquote Maryland assault weapons ban case heard and get these things overthrown, and the left knows it. They know their entire agenda is built on a house of cards, and they know Kavanaugh will help collapse it. He's the wind that's going to blow it down.
Hey, Mark, take care of yourself, buddy. Always a pleasure.
God bless you. Thanks, Curt. Appreciate it.
You too. All right. Mark Walters, Armed American Radio, every day and Sunday nights. You can hear him on armedamericanradio.org. They're on stations all over the planet. Today's winner. I don't get to talk enough sports here, but I want to talk about today's winner in the sports arena as it relates to the sports arena. Minnesota Twins pitcher Fernando Rodney left the game early last week to go to his processing as he became a legal U.S. citizen. And there's an article on Breitbart.com about it, and it's a great story. And it's a good story. And I tweeted at him last night that I was proud to see someone going about the legal route of becoming a citizen. So Fernando Rodney didn't take any shortcuts, didn't use his celebrity. He did the thing that every law-abiding citizen is supposed to do and non-citizen is supposed to do to become a legal citizen of this country. And hats off to him. I had a lot of losers today. Pretty much everybody from Chris Cuomo to Stelter, all these liberal left freaking out people. But I'm going to give it to Adam Schiff. when I look at the body of politicians that come out of California, I don't wonder why the state's the shithole it is. But he called Trump's statements a despicable act of betrayal of the United States. It was a new low. I found it just disgusting. This is probably without a doubt the most shameful and cowardly surrender of American interests in modern history, blah, 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 blah. Adam Schiff's a clown, and I hate to give him any more time, but there's a reason that Weasley-ass guy is only ever talking to people on CNN and not getting his ass buried by Tucker Carlson on Fox. But Adam Schiff, you're the far and away the winner. John McCain, unfortunately, taking a close second place for his stupid comments. But I'm going to attribute most of what's happened to him in the last year and a half to his illness. I have to believe that going away, or I'm going to be crushed that a man has ruined everything he created from a legacy perspective because he's got something being held over his head. So anyway, God bless you guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will catch up with you guys tomorrow. Judge Jeannie, and always an energetic conversation with an amazing woman. So have a great day. God bless, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.